Take a look at 18VA. This is an 18XX game. This looks like it's probably a fairly good light one to start the series with. First of all, tiny board, which is very attractive to me right now for whatever reason. Not for solo play, but for where I get to play in the game store. Secondly, it's kind of close to the 1830 mainline type rules, which means most of the games that you'll see sort of follow something close to this. It's got the two-dimensional board. It's got some special factors to it. It looks like it's going to be a shorter game overall. It also only holds 5 players, which might have some advantages. We'll see. I generally favor games with larger number of players, but this one really attracted me. I guess the main reason was the idea of the coal companies which run over there, but also maybe the size. I ended up paying way too much for it probably, but I don't know. I saw another one go for about the same price, which is about the price that they go for new. You just don't have to wait for deep thought to get around to your printing. It does have a few differences though, and we'll take a look at how it plays out. This is mostly the normal setup. I've got all my certificates here just to keep. You're supposed to set up the preferred stocks in here, and those are the ones that you're going to buy to float the company initially. One of the companies is going to start the game every time, which is the Baltimore and Ohio. It kind of automatically starts, as opposed to some of the other games where a company that is in your initial offering is not really an auto start, but you could. So like in 1830, you can keep it around and gain income from it. This you cannot. The only thing you get from it is its base value is significantly less than what you'll probably float it at. This game has an $8,000 bank, which you can see there's a lot of money withdrawn from my chip pool, and then each player gets their share of that. In a 5-player game, that's $240. It goes up to 600 in a 2-player game. I don't know about playing any 18XX in 2. I'm pretty iffy about playing most of them in 3, to tell you the truth. The goal of the game is whenever the end of the game happens, and this goes for all the 18XXs, basically however much cash you have on hand plus the stock value of the shares that you've invested in. The stock values are going to move around based on what you do with the companies. Some quick player etiquette things. Stuff is pretty much open. I think everything is open in this game. You have different phases to the game, which come out as the different trains come out. And those are related here. So the 2 train is the first train to come out. You're allowed to have, 4 trains if you're a 10-share company. There's only one 10-share company at the beginning of the game. That's the B&O. Most of the companies will have 2 trains only as their limit. You can only lay yellow track tiles. There's 1 operating round between each stock round. And the trains that are available, well, it's not just the 2 train. There's also this 1G train, which is going to be for handling just freight. And in this game, that's coal for the most part. Shipping materials too, I believe. Count as freight. We'll take a look at how those different trains operate in a little bit. And the red spaces on the game, I'll use the value in the upper section of the space, which is a lower value in all cases. These are something special. These are coal destinations. The actual value of coal destinations is based upon what train is currently out, and it's a little bit more flexible than the red off map areas. The next train to come out is the 3 or 2G. Green track becomes available. There'll be 2 operating rounds between each stock round. And from then on, corporations can buy private companies. And you can turn 5 share companies into 10 share companies, which gives you more train limit, gives you more potential operating, well, gives you more operating cash as well. When the first 4 or 3G comes out, the train limit goes down to 1 for the 5 shares and 3 for the 10 share. Well, there's more than one 10 share at this point. Still 2 operating rounds. And the first trains, the 2 1Gs, will be destroyed at that point. Now, when we get up to the 5th phase, that's the first 5 or 4G train. I believe those are the first permanent trains in the game. Looks like it. You're only allowed 2 trains. You're automatically going to convert all 5 share companies into 10 share companies, so they get some quick cash there. The brown track becomes available. There's 3 operating rounds between. And we go up to the higher or more valuable value for those. When the 6 or 5G comes out, the first one comes out, a 4D train becomes available. And those are your diesels and your expensive trains. And then when the first 4D comes out, that'll scrap the 4 and 3G trains. So you've got a little bit quicker destruction of the 3 trains, dying on the 5 instead of the 6. The stock market, the values up here are your par values that you're going to be allowed to start your corporations at. You have a certificate limit. And also a limit of ownership of companies. So the certificate limit is based on the number of players, and in 5 players, that's only 10 certificates. Certificates might be, like this one, more than 1 share of the company. Private companies, there are only 3 of them in this game, are considered certificates. And I'm trying to see the percentage. Okay, you're allowed to own no more than 60% of a corporation's stock, which is normal for 10 share companies. You're allowed to own basically 5 certificates, one of which may be the president's. But in 5 share companies, you can only hold the president's share, which is worth 40%, and 120% share behind that. So you can't have more than 50% of a company in the stock pool. Now, what's weird with this is kind of follows the 1830 flavor here. Anything that's in the stock pool ends up generating cash for the companies. Anything that's in the company treasury does not. And see, the initial shares, in the company treasury pay, when you buy them, pay to the company. The B&O may have something weird going on in it because it's got 10 shares. I think capitalization, though, after you convert to 10 shares changes, and the B&O starts out as a 10 share. Okay, share prices are going to move in a number of different ways. Whenever you sell shares during a stock round, the share price goes down 1 row for every share sold. If all of the shares are owned by players, the share price of the corporation moves up 1 row at the end of the entire stock round. When everybody's passed, you'll be able to shift up there. If the corporation withholds its earnings or doesn't make any earnings on a run, it moves 1 column left. And if it pays a dividend that's equal or greater to the current share value of the company, it moves to the right, which means poorly performing companies will just stay even when they pay out their dividends. It's a slight difference from the main line there. If a share price should be moved and it can't because it's at the end of the row, it'll go up. If it should move up or down and it can't move further in that direction, it just hits a wall and doesn't go in any direction there. Corporations enter a share value last, go on the bottom of the stack, essentially. This is the same as an 1830 game. You're going to see the ordering of the trains is going to be based on the stock value. So the corporations get to move in order of their stock value. So if you're the last person in there, you'll move last on the list. That can cause some issues when you have companies that aren't paying. We're going to have to be a little careful with this. So normally in a game of 1830 or whatever, if this doesn't pay out, I can just slip this underneath and that's no big deal. And then if some other guy is here and pays out, well, he'll just slip, and that's essentially underneath the B&O. It's also underneath this, but here's the problem. We're in this situation here, and the B&O does not pay out and slips under. Now, if this one stands still, that's fine. It flips into this position. But let's say we're here, and instead, well, actually, no, that's not fine. The B&O doesn't pay out. It drops down. This guy pays out, but doesn't meet his, $11 a share run. Well, he's officially actually in front of the B&O still because he was there earlier. And that's going to be kind of tricky to handle. I'm going to have to be careful about that, where it may happen, because I'm very used to share values just ending up, if you're the last guy to go, well, you're the last guy who got into that space. That's not the case anymore, so you kind of have to keep the stacking order a little bit more carefully in this. You probably have to in games that give partial dividends too, and I'm maybe sloppy with that and don't end up doing it correctly. Okay. The initial stock round, as with most of these games, is got special rules. We have to dispose of the private companies and the Baltimore and Ohio before we go further. And then the player ordering is reset based on what you buy, how much you buy. All right. Each player is allowed to put a bid on any of these items in turn order. They must bid at least $5 greater than the last bid and no lower than the face value. And all bids are $5 multiples. The face value of the B&O is considered to be 140. The others have their face value written on them. This has a different bidding mechanism than 1830 does in most games, to tell you the truth. You are allowed to bid on any of these. And you continue going until all players have passed consecutively. You can't just buy the cheapest one available. That has to be bid out too. Whoever's bid the most on any of these, and they have to have the cash on hand in order to make a bid. So for example, if I bid $100 on this, that uses up $100. I don't get to use that for another bid on something else, which is of some importance. Unless somebody has overbid me. If somebody has overbid me, that releases me from my bid on that item. Everything that's been bid on, once everybody passes, goes to the highest bidder on that item and is given to them for the cash that they put on it. Anything that's not been bid on will now be dropped by $10 for auction, and we start the auction, well, we continue the auction at that point. The face value can keep going down by $10. If something ever hits zero, that certificate the private company has to be offered for $0. And if you're offered it at $0, you must make a bid of zero on it. Which means that one will sell. People can continue bidding after the lowered price has been bid. They can end up bidding more than the original offering was. The person who gets the B&O presidency sets its par value at any of these values. It probably behooves him to set it at $100 a share. If he buys it at $140, he makes a quick $60 there. I gotta swap batteries out. Once the B&O has been set in value, and that's done after all of these have been sold, no matter what, you wait until everything happens before you set that value. The priority deal card will be given to whoever has the most remaining cash, and everybody else's order will be reseated to that, so that second most cash is next. If two people are tied, they stay in the same seating order they were in originally, in comparison. The private companies, these are going to be like privates in 1830. They're going to give you some special ability, and they give you a revenue each turn. Once you buy them, you keep them yourself until the end of the game, unless a corporation buys them. Starting in phase 3, the corporations can buy private companies from anywhere from 50 to 150% of their printed face value. You're not going to get double the value, so they're not as killer as they are in 1830. I got a problem. Battery charger sometimes kind of slips down and it stops charging. It turns green and acts like it's completely charged. At this point, I knew that was bogus because it was pretty much dead. Okay. If a private company is bought from a player in this way, it remains part of that corporation then for the rest of the game until the corporation uses the private company's special power. Once it uses a private company's special power, the private company closes and it will no longer produce its revenue. There's only 3 of them, and they each have their own little special abilities. Okay, the Railway Express Agency adds plus 10 to a single city for the owning corporation. Now, that seems kind of crappy because it has a $10 revenue. You may have a situation where you do want to add 10 to a company, to a city that you're hitting multiple times though. And you'll put one marker on the city that you're boosting and one marker on your company's charter to indicate that you own it. This goes away because you won't be making money anymore. Those will remain permanent for the rest of the game. The next one is the Tredegar Ironworks. This allows you to subtract $200 from the cost of a train. At any point you can buy a train, you can take $200 off that cost by closing this company out. That's, pretty nice. Some quick cash to get yourself a permanent train or something. And that, of course, closes it. The final one is the Potomac Yard. This gives you two options. You can either get a Potomac Yard station. One of these goes on your corporation. One of these is a free station for your corporation. That station will be placed in any hex, including off-map cities, port cities, or CMDs that already contains a circle for a city. But this doesn't fill the circle for the city. It's off the side of it. It counts as though you have a circle in that city, but it won't block off operations for other companies, which will make sense a little later if you're not used to 18xx's. I'll go into more of this one because it is a fairly basic one. The other option is you could take this, which gives your company the right to hold one more train than it normally would. And over somewhere we had the train limits listed. You know, that could be very helpful because the more trains you have, the more money you can probably make. Okay. And once again, reiterating, the special power, if it's not used, you keep getting the revenue from the private company on your corporation or personally, and you can't use the power personally. During your stock rounds, you can sell and then buy stock. If you have the priority deal, you get the first shot. Then everybody in order gets to sell stocks and then buy a stock. It'll keep going until everybody passes. If everybody passes, whoever passed first in that sequence of passes will get the priority deal card. They'll get the first option to do stock operations the next time. If you do sell stock, and you can sell as much stock as you like within certain limitations, but if you do sell stock in a corporation, you can't buy stock for that corporation for the remainder of the current stock round. You can choose to order the sales that you do at once however you like, which might be important in terms of positioning for who goes first over there. Stock will be sold at the current market value. If you sell more than one share, you get the value that the stock's currently at, although it'll drop a number of rows all at once. Okay. Then after you sell as many shares as you wish to sell in that particular turn in the stock round, you can buy one certificate. You can buy anything available in a corporation treasury, in the bank pool, subject to share limits and certificate limits. Once you buy a stock, you may not sell any more stock that turn. Stock that's purchased, you will get another chance as you go around and get another turn in the stock round. Stock that's purchased is bought at the current market value, whether you purchase it from the pool or from a company's treasury. The par value is only important at the very beginning when the company first is floated. When stock is bought from the pool, the money goes to the bank. When stock is bought from the corporate treasury, the money is paid to the corporation treasury. This is important. The first five shares, which is 4 certificates, are present in here. Look at the B&O and how that works. That may have some special rules. When the company's stock is purchased for the first time, the president's certificate has to be the first certificate purchased. You cannot exceed your certificate limit, nor the 60% holding limit for a corporation. Otherwise, there's no restriction on what you can purchase. For selling, there's some restriction. You can't end up with more than 50% of the corporation in the pool. When you buy the president's certificate, you declare the value of the stock and put it in one of these starting value spaces according to what you declared. You're limited to that. And you'll pay twice the starting value of the corporation because you're getting twice as many shares. Now, the owner of the B&O just sets the price. He's already bought that share for $140 or whatever he bid on it. The two have nothing to do with each other. You could bid $500 on this, not that you have that, in this one, and it would still start somewhere between $70 and $100 per share. Okay. With the exception of the B&O, all corporations begin the game prior to Phase 5 as 5-share companies. The B&O always starts as a 10-share company. Any remaining companies that start prior to Phase 5 will eventually turn to 10-share companies, and they'll issue those additional shares of stock. If you start after the beginning of Phase 5, when the first 5 train is bought, you start as a 10-share company. A 10-share company has 10 shares available, the presidency with 20% of the company, and 8 shares in single certificates, each worth 10%. 5-share companies have 5 shares. The president's certificate is worth 40%, and each of the 3 remaining shares are worth 20%. You declare the corporation you start, you set the starting value of the corporation on the stock market, and buy the president's certificate for twice that starting value. This starts the corporation. You don't need to buy any additional stock. And the corporation will operate normally in the operating round. Thus, the B&O is started in the initial stock round as soon as the presidency is purchased. The corporate charter and an appropriate number of station tokens, that'll only be 2 with a 5-share company and 4 with a 10-share company, are given to the corporation for placement. This one is going to be used to mark wherever the B&O starts. The rest are its tokens that'll be available for purchase at the price. This one I'll start in its starting hex, which is C8, right there. Each of the corporations has a starting space on it. Remember, you'll only have 2 of those if you start with a 5-share corporation. But it'll eventually get bigger. You put the corporation's base token in the home station hex at that point. When buying stock from a 5-share company, the 5 shares of preferred stock are bought by paying the money into the corporation treasury. When you buy the 6th share of a 10-share company, the corporation will get 5 times its current market value, which is going to be to cover those additional 5 shares. The remaining 4 shares are placed in the bank pool, and because of this rule, the bank pool can hold more than 50%, but you can't sell more. You can't sell so that it brings it above 50%. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. We have the different corporations, how they likely will start, but there's no guarantee. But the B&O always starts as a 10-share company. How does the funding of the B&O happen? Yeah, we still don't know that yet. I think the first 5 shares pay into the corporation, and then the 6th share will boost its income. We'll see if there's anything special about that. New corporations after phase 5. If you start a corporation after phase 5, it'll start as a 10-share company. It starts with 10 shares and 4 station tokens. The 5 shares previously set aside should be inserted at the bottom of the stock shares already in the corporate treasury, and the bank will underwrite the last 40% of the stock just as above. And I think that's just how the B&O works. The president of the corporation is whoever owns the most shares of the corporation. If you already have the presidency, somebody has to exceed your shares in order for you to lose the presidency. If you're selling the corporation off, somebody has to be able to take that president's certificate, which means they already have enough shares in their hand that you can exchange the president's certificate with them so you can sell it to the bank pool. Otherwise, you can't sell the presidency. You cannot sell the presidency to the bank pool. The only way you can sell it is to exchange it first as part of that sales. For operating rounds, okay. First, every player who has an open, or corporation that has an open private company, gets the cash from that private company in each operating round. The revenue, after that's been paid, then the corporation who has the highest value on the stock market chart, top in a single space first, gets to go next. And you'll follow them down in order. If there's a tie, so for example, there's a 90 here, a 90 here, the rightmost space gets to go in preference to the lefter spaces. And your operating round will consist of a series of actions. You get to operate once in each operating round after each of the corporations has completed its full operating round. Then this was the last operating round of the cycle, in which case we go to another stock round. And remember, there's a different amount based on the trains. To start with, there's only one operating round between stock rounds. Or you have more operating rounds available, and you move the token forward and keep running operating rounds. private companies, special powers can be done during the corporation's operating term. Once phase 3 begins, a 5-share company can be converted to a 10-share company at the beginning of the corporation's operating round. To convert it, you take the 5 remaining shares, transfer them to the corporation treasury, and you add 2 more tokens. And from then on, people can buy that 6th share of the corporation. When they do so, they trigger the underwriting. Whoever buys that first one 5 times, well, they pay the value of that first share, and then 4 times the value additionally goes into the corporate treasury. You don't get the cash until somebody buys one of those shares, though. Then, once phase 5 begins, everything is automatically converted into 10-share companies all at once, even if they've previously operated. You layer upgrade track. Each corporation can place either a yellow tile or upgrade 1 tile. No multiple track lays here. You lay the track. Well, the way you lay track is you have to trace back to one of your dots. You can't be closed out from where you are. And if it's yellow track, you have to follow certain limitations. So for example, these P's, they matter when you get to the brown track. Before that, you can place regular yellow track there. And I don't know, you have to maintain all existing track connections. So for example, if I placed this is legitimate because, I don't know, let's say I have a dot here. We'll just make some shit up. I can lay this, and then I can't lay any track that leads off the board or that leads to one of these blue borders, the dark blue borders, because those don't cross. I couldn't lay track that like went up into here. That would be illegal. And if I wanted to upgrade that, let's say it was late enough that I could, well, I could place a piece of track like this because it maintains all the track and doesn't violate any of the rules. I could also probably place this track for the same reason. I couldn't do something like this, even though it doesn't violate any of the normal track rules. It no longer preserves this piece of track. And that's one of the key elements. And you go from yellow to green to brown to gray. There isn't a lot of brown track available. There's actually not even a lot of green track available. Because it uses these sharp corner tracks, things are a little simplified, but you actually don't need as much track to be able to do things. You don't have to go out of your way to try to hook things up in certain ways. But it also means the track in each hex is not as complex, which actually means that you have sometimes more complex root calculation. I don't know how big a deal that'll be in this game. Okay. You can't set up track to prevent a corporation from being able to create a legal route on which it could score revenue using the currently available tiles and upgrades. Boy, that's a kind misroll. Certain hexes have mines or cities. Cities mean that you play white circle tracks, and we have upgrades listed here, so the white circles upgrade to double white circles, etc. The only restriction is the P's go in these, and the not P browns can go anywhere else. The reason for that is these, well, not this one. Most of these have a prohibited space, not this one, but they're also more valuable cities in general. So like this one has a prohibited space that it can't go into, so it needs this blank version. But these are also a little more valuable. You'll see they're 50 instead of 40 when you get up there. So they become somewhat more useful cities. You're going to probably have to refer to this to see where those locations are. Otherwise, you may not be able to recognize them. Mines are allowed 4 and 58, which is these pieces. Now these look like doinkers. If you're used to other XX games, you're saying, well, wait a minute, what? Usually there's like little dots on here, and that's what they refer to. No, here it's these. Those are your mines. And those operate a little special because normal passenger trains can't carry coal. Okay. Maybe upgraded to 171 tile. Okay, Richmond and Washington are two special locations. They go from P's to these special tracks, special tiles that are worth even more. And they're just two cities that can upgrade a little bit higher. After you lay your track, you're allowed to buy a token. If you have a legal route that goes to a certain city that has an open space on it, you can buy your next token. So your first token, say with the B&O, would be here. Well, if you've laid some track, let's just say, let's just do something legal. Let's do this. That looks legal. And I can run off the map here because there's a little special port thing, and we'll talk about special port things in a moment. From there, I could like lay this track, and then maybe lay this track. This is taking several turns to do. Well, once I lay this, I might decide, you know, this is really an important space to me. I'll spend $40 to put a dot there. And that dot does a couple of things. One is, if there's no empty circles in a city, you cannot run through that city unless you have a dot there. Another is, your trains are going to run based out of dots, tokens that you have on the board. So I could run trains out of here and also out of here. And that's kind of important in terms of sometimes when you have multiple routes, you can set things up nicely. The more trains you have, the more advantage there is to multiple dots, though. Yeah, I'm not making a damn bit of sense, am I? Off-map areas are treated a little differently. There's off-map cities, which are these red things. And look, they have circles in them. What does that mean? That's treated like a normal city for your operating run, which we'll get to in a bit. But if you have the token there, well, first of all, they can only be the end of your route. So you could have something like this. You can't run through one of these cities, even if they have multiple boinkers coming out of them. But the other bonus there is, if you have your corporation token there, you get to double the value of that off-map city. That's huge. First of all, this is a $40 city to begin with. You double that and make it an 80. Wow, you really want to go there. But there aren't a lot of opportunities to get there. There's only one track that leads there, so you're only going to run one train into there, it turns out. Okay, ports. Ports are these little things coming off the map here. The way these work is they're major dockyards and loading areas. Ports must be at the end of a legal route. They don't count against the amount of cities that your train can hit. They're not considered to be separate from the city, and you can't run from the city to the port. But they add their value to the port, to the city that you're in. I think only if you have a token there. Let me see how this goes. Let's see how this is working. If a corporation has a station token in the port, the value of the city is increased by the port bonus. Additionally, if the corporation has a station token in the port and is running a freight train, one of the G trains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Gs to the port, you get to double the city with its port bonus there. So again, some interesting facets to where you're going to make money. Now this is a little different. Here you can double even with a regular passenger train. Here you can only double if you're running a freight train there, but you can get the port value as long as you have the token there. Notice the port values decrease, not Newport News, not the southern ones. The northern port values decrease as the game continues, as you go into the brown phase. Interesting facet there. Coal mining districts, that's these. These are large areas of coal exploitation. If you have a passenger train, you can't run into this. But if you have a freight train, you're allowed to run into the CMD. This doesn't count as a city against the train number. So like the ports, you can go there for free. If you do not have a station token in the CMD, you add the amount shown here, which corresponds, I believe, with this. Yeah. The 5G train's worth 100, the 4G's 80, yeah. And it really is just which train's available. It doesn't matter. This color thing doesn't make a damn bit of difference. If you have a station token there, you add the amount shown on the table below. What do I have? If you don't have a station marker, you add the amount shown, which is $20 times your freight train number to your normal revenue. If you do have a station token, you add that amount to your normal revenue, and then add the same amount to your corporation treasury, which is indicating that the fact that you're hitting here with a route, you're pulling extra coal in, that's cutting into your operating expenses. And you'll notice it doesn't work with diesel trains, so it's kind of cool that way, because the freight trains aren't diesels. Earnings from the CMD are paid from the bank to the corporate treasury during the corporate's dividend payment phase. This will stop when the 4Ds begin. When the 4Ds begin, there is no more special revenue going into the corporate treasury. These amounts are paid to the corporate treasury if you have a station. This revenue is no longer paid. I don't know, this may be that none of the revenue is paid after the 4D goes there, which means no, the value of the train determines how much money you make. The bonus revenue for it being for running to a station where you have the token is no longer paid after the 4Ds show up, but you can still make the regular call run. All right, how do you determine your earnings? Basically, the rule is you can only hit a number of cities equal to the type of train you have. The freight trains hit one less city than the passenger trains do, but they can run to CMDs, and they count the revenue value of mines. The doinkers. Now, the doinkers aren't worth a hell of a lot, but you get them for free with a freight train. All cities, mines, and off-map areas included in the route count for revenue, except passenger trains can't run to a CMD and they don't collect for the mines. A passenger route that includes no tokens other than one in a CMD is not a legal route, and a passenger route who has a token in an off-map city is legal, but a passenger train still has to connect two cities, and that's kind of funky. Not funky, but that's kind of a big difference between it and the freight trains. If a train runs to an off-map area, it must be one end of the route. It may end and begin the route at the off-map areas if it's otherwise legal. However, no more than one of each type of off-map areas may be included in a route. So you can go from a city to a port, but you can't go from a red city to a red city with the same train. And most notably, you can't go from a CMD to a CMD if you're a freight train. The train may be run from a CMD to a port, from a CMD to an off-map city, from an off-map city to a port, but not from a port to a port, etc. The train must trace a legal route to the port arrow in order to receive the port bonus. The arrow is not considered a separate city, however, it just bonuses that city, and it only does so if you have the token there, right? I think that's what we were saying. trains can't use a track segment more than once. The junction in the middle of a green or brown is not considered part of the track segment, which is to say, here I can go from here to here, and another train, well, that's not a good example. I could go from here to here, and another or the same train could then go from here to here. That center space doesn't count, and the same if it has a dot on it. I could run through the city without it counting as the same track, but the track coming out of the city has to be unique. And we gotta swap batteries again. Can't run through a city that's completely filled with other corporation station tokens, the exception being this. Now they say something here which is a little weird. In particular, a train does not receive a port bonus if all the city circles in the port city are occupied by hostile tokens. But here, that port bonus only comes if you have the station token in the port. So there's a bit of a discrepancy between the way these two rules are worded. I think the token has to count, but I'm not sure. Maybe there's some errata on this. Trains may not use track of any of the corporation's other trains in the same operating route except the junctions. You can run to or through the same cities, though, provided you don't reuse the same track. Which means, let's see, we'll make this up here. Dots here and here. I could run a train between these two cities and a separate train between, say, these three cities. Or I could run a train here, and a third train here. The value is going to be the sum of all the city's mines and off-map areas included in each route. For the 4D train, you get to pick the sum of up to 4 cities in the route and double it after all other adjustments for station tokens in off-map cities or port cities. I don't know if we're going to have to look at the 4D because I think it's a diesel and can skip cities, but I'm not positive. But whatever it is, it gets to double the up to 4 cities in its route after all other adjustments. And you sum all the different routes. And so in the example I was looking at here, let's say I had a train running here for 40, a train running here for 40, and a train running here for 60. Well, I would get 40, 80, and 60 is 140 as my total. Now, I can withhold the dividend, and it just goes into my corporate treasury, and my stock value drops. I can pay out the dividend, and if the dividend is greater than the share value of the corporation, paying it out will move this share value up. If I pay it out, everybody gets shares equal to their percentage of the company. Now, at the beginning, Beano is not a good example. At the beginning, 5-share companies are worth 40 or 20% per certificate. Once they become 10-share companies, they drop to 20% or 10% per certificate of that revenue that I'm paying out as dividends. I also pay earnings due to corporation, let me see, shares in the bank pool will pay their dividends into the company treasury. Shares in the company treasury don't pay to anyone, they go back to the bank. And then also earnings due to CMD routes with a token and a freight train running to it get paid out at this time. Now, after I have run my operating costs, I can buy new trains. I can buy a train from the bank pool or from another corporation. To buy it from the bank or pool, I have to pay the purchase price of the available train that I wish to buy. It has to come from my treasury capital. If this causes a phase change, any required actions are taken after which the operating company can purchase additional trains up to the current train limit. If the phase change includes a reduction in the train limit, all corporations, including the one operating, have to discard any trains in excess of the train limit. The president gets to choose what he does. They're thrown into the pool, and they'll be available to other companies. In fact, they may be required to be purchased for a mandatory purchase if they're the cheapest train available. Purchasing trains from other corporations, you make a mutual agreement as to how much to pay for it. It has to be at least $1 though. Trains purchased from the bank in the order they appear. You get the choice for most of these of whether you want a freight train or a regular passenger train. The freight trains have some certain advantages. Trains are purchased from the bank. Once the first 6 5G train has been bought, something's here. When a corporation buys a new train, it must buy the topmost train in the train stack. No more than one train of the current type may be bought from the bank in an operating round. If there are additional trains of the remaining current type, the corporation may not buy more until their next operating round. Operating turn, whatever. However, if the next train available is of a new type, you may buy that train also. Thus, you may buy at most 2 trains from the bank. Now, this is a little different from how this is worded, which says, after which the operating corporation may purchase additional trains up to the current train limit. Again, it feels like there's some fuzziness and failure with these rules, but my feeling is that this stands as the actual rule, which is you can buy at most 2 trains from the bank in an operating turn. The last train of current type and the first train of the next type. Other than the train limit, there are no restrictions on buying trains from the pool or other corporations. So you can buy one of the trains from here, but you could buy additional from here or from corporations. Once the first 6 or 5G has been bought, 4Gs become immediately available. And in theory, you could buy the last 5 4G, the first 6 5G, and the first 4D. And maybe even more than that. If you have the +1 train token. Because the rule is just not in effect anymore from what I can see. I don't know why I'm looking this up. Start. Here we go. So you're allowed 2 trains at that point. So you could be allowed 3. Yeah, that would be, you would only be allowed those 3 trains. And it would be really hard to manage that. Not just for the cost involved, but just the mechanical permutations to get that to happen. If a new train is purchased, a new phase begins. A new train type is purchased. A new phase begins and the adjustments pertinent come into effect immediately. The type, it doesn't matter if you took a freight or a passenger train. And we got the different trains listed here, a little speedy chart there. The 2 and 1G are considered the same type. Basically, whatever's on the different sides is the same type. You must use the +1 train limit or the Tredegar Ironworks during the train purchase phase. So you can't trigger it at any other time. That's important for this one because you might want to save it while someone else is buying a train. Now you've got to do it beforehand. When a train's purchased, the corporate president must declare if it's passenger or freight. It won't change after that. Passenger trains can travel only to cities and ports. They may never travel to the CMDs, and they ignore the mines, although they can travel through them. Freight trains can go to any hex or off-map area, and they count each hex or off-map area for revenue. They may never include more than 1 CMD in their route, and they gain revenue from traveling to CMDs or mines, but they don't actually have to go to them. If they have a train number of 2G or more, they can run between 2 cities. A 1G has to have 2 locations, and at least one of those locations has to be a CMD or mine, I think, because otherwise you don't have a route. Mandatory train purchase. If you don't own a train, you got to. If you have whether or not you have a legal run. If you have the cash in your treasury, you can buy whatever trains you want from the bank or the pool or other players. If you must buy a train and you can't afford one from anywhere, and you can't afford one from the bank, but you can afford one from the pool, you must buy the one from the pool. If you may purchase it from another corporation at your choice of cash. This can cause issues, but if a corporation does not have sufficient funds to buy a train from the bank or pool, you must make up the difference to buy the least expensive train available from the bank or pool. You can use the Tredegar Ironworks, but you don't have to. If you have insufficient cash on hand, you have to sell stock to raise the difference. You may sell stock, any stock you wish to raise the required amount, subject to normal limitations. Stock in corporations that have not completed a full turn in the operating round may never be sold if they haven't actually gotten to run yet. So you may not be able to sell all the stocks that you wish to. You may not sell sufficient stock in the operating corporation to change presidency, but you can change presidency in other corporations. If after you sell all the stock you're legally allowed to sell, you still can't buy a train with the cash you can raise, you are bankrupt. Your remaining stock holdings are placed in the pool, which can go over 50% again, and the share prices remain unaffected by this. Any private companies you own are discarded and are out of the game. And you're out of the game. The president of any of the controlled corporations is transferred to the next eligible player. If no such player exists, the corporation is closed and all of its shares are removed without compensation. Its stations are removed from the map, and any trains it owns are placed in the pool and become available for purchase. All privates will be discarded by the corporation that's destroyed. Any special power tokens are removed from the corporations destroyed and from the map. And the corporation's shares now allow it to restart as a whole new corporation. If the presidency of the corporation for which the bankrupt power buying the train is transferred in this manner, its treasury will contain the amount raised by the now bankrupt president during his emergency money raising. The new president must continue the emergency money raising using his own resources to buy a train from the corporation. So one corporation could cause problems for more than one person. The game normally ends after the last operating round of the set of operating rounds in which the bank runs out of money. If the bank runs out of money during a stock round, then we play a complete set of operating rounds in between. Players and corporations can continue to receive their revenues earned during the final set of operating rounds, even if there isn't enough cash there. There's plenty of cash over there to cover that, many thousands. Okay, you add the face value of private companies that you own, the current value of any shares of stock that you own at the end, however much cash you have on hand. You ignore whatever assets, cash, and trains are owned by the corporations, and that'll be your net worth. If all players but one have gone bankrupt, the remaining player wins. So this is kind of cool because it gets rid of, there's a gamey function that shows up in 1830 tournament games where everybody kind of decides, well, my best chance of winning is to run as hard as I can and hope somebody else goes bankrupt and it's not me. And you don't worry about trying to keep your corporations alive. This game forces you to try to keep your corporations alive because everybody but one person could go bankrupt. You could also, though, because of the way the bankruptcy rules work, you could have a situation where everybody's liable to go bankrupt. And if that's going to happen, then you might see some really pathological play where people are like transferring a train back and forth to keep the game alive for them and hoping somebody else goes bankrupt. Anyway, I I know this rules intro sucked. I was hoping to give it something that would be a little better for new players, but honestly, you're best off looking at, for the intro to the system, I think I did it in 1830. I know I did it in 1830. I think I did it in 18AL as well, for an intro to the system. I'm tired and hungry and worse than usual, I fear. All right, let's send this sucker up.